Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Zeller, and I'm your host for this session. Because this is a virtual session, everyone will need to post their questions in the chat in the virtual event. For those of you in person, you'll need to be logged into the virtual event. So go to Stages, then Grand 2, 3 for this session. And you will we'll be monitoring your questions in the chat and get to all of them at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Dahlstro, coming to you from Lund, Sweden.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Sarah. I was supposed to be in Seattle today, so I'm gutted that I can't be with you in person, but I am very excited to at least be able to bring this to you remotely. I started out in UX a very long time ago, more precisely back in 2001. In 2007, I started working for my first digital agency. And back then, things were quite different. The main fight was making sure that UX was involved from start to finish, which is obviously still a battle today. We used a software called Visio most of the time back then. And the main thing that people were kind of concerned with, clients and so forth, was making sure that content was visible above the fold. And that stems from the early days of print, actually, and screen sizes where actually on magazines you could see kind of the first page of a newspaper and making sure that the main headline was visible above the fold, essentially. That was what most people kind of cared about. In early 2011, I left to begin freelancing. At that same time, mobile was very much in its infancy, and the first iPhone had just launched in June 2007. We usually designed bespoke mobile websites at that time, but there was a movement to start doing what's called responsive design. And obviously, you guys are very familiar with that. It was Ethan Marcotte who coined the term in May 2009, if I don't remember wrongly. And with responsive design, what changed was that there was no longer just one view that we were designing for. And like before, we were printing out just one view and putting it up on the wall for internal reviews. Now there were multiple reviews. And around a couple of years after Ethan Marcotte and responsive design, mobile first became a thing. And we've heard early on today from Luke, and obviously he'd written one of the books about it, which came out in October 2011. As for me, I didn't write any books on that subject, but I gave a lot of workshops on the subject, and that was really good because it kept me on my toes. In every single class I did for General Assembly, I included these visualizations from OpenSignal on Android fragmentation, and it showed a number of unique devices that access the OpenSignal's website, I believe it was. And it changed every single time. So there was more and more stuff that we needed to kind of account for, and more stuff that needed to be updated every single time. And in terms of fighting, what we were fighting most for was making sure that we tried to design with the same content on all kind of devices as the starting point, starting with mobile first. And then, of course, making sure that UX was involved from start to finish. At this time, prototyping was very much in its infancy. There were, of course, tools out there, but what really changed prototyping for the majority of us and kind of collaborative working was Figma. They came out in public release in September 2016 and iterated. And in 2017, when these tweets are from, that's when things kind of changed a little bit more, and it became kind of more powerful. In 2019, Figma released their auto layout feature, and around the same time, Miro and other people, other kind of software came out. And again, this kind of collaborative ways of working made how we worked, how we presented, and how we communicated a lot easier. So why am I telling you this? It's because when I look back over my years in UX, a lot has changed since I started, and even more so in the recent years. We are now at a time when things are going to change exponentially. Between the time that I got the invite to speak at this conference here today and actually now standing here, so much has happened in AI. Some of these things change how we do what we do, and to some extent why we do it. And over the next few years, and even more years to come, it will change even more. Today, I'm going to cover how AI is affecting UX design, where, how, and why storytelling is such a crucial aspect going forwards. But in order to figure out how AI is actually changing UX design and where storytelling fits into the picture of all of this, we first need to look at what we actually do and why. As UX and product designers, we of course do a wealth of things. I've tried to distill it down to 5 key aspects in terms of what we kind of do and why we do them. And I kind of looked at research to understand needs and the landscape, looked at kind of defining to come up with and validate early concepts, and then designing, which is to come up with the product and the experience of the same. Present is something we do as well to get both buy-in, feedback, and sign-off. And then, of course, test to validate, understand, iterate, and improve on what we kind of already launched. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into the first one, which is research. When I started out in digital and marketing agencies, we worked with a lot of personas. And over the years working in this field, few things have been so debated as personas, except for, of course, what we should call ourselves. But say what you will about them, personas are in essence about understanding user needs and understanding what our products and services need to do and how and why. But understanding needs, as we know, isn't all about the users. One of the first pieces of feedback I got as a midweight UX designer working for that first digital agency was that I had to demonstrate knowledge of the businesses I was working with and the clients I was working with in order to become senior. I had to familiarize myself with the landscape of digital advertising, essentially, but also that of banking and of entertainment and of TV and of all sorts of things that I was working with. And of course, their needs when it came to each and individual projects that we were working on as well. And it was a lot of fun, but it took a lot of time. Some of that research came from the clients we worked with, so it was a matter of going through it. Sometimes they came with personas. Sometimes we had to spend lots of time going through and putting it all together, and we worked with planners and strategies on that matter. As I mentioned, it took time both to kind of do the research, but then actually put together the presentation of the same and kind of distilling it down into something that we could use in our work. As my old boss at the agency used to say, as UX designers, we of course have a lot of different tools at our disposals in terms of that kind of first discovery phase where we figure out what's actually going on and why we're doing certain things. We work with user journeys, we work with flows, we work with customer experience maps and so forth. And all of these things are ways of actually understanding both user and business needs, not obviously business needs when it comes to user journeys, but experience maps. So they can take a lot of forms, different kind of forms. Today, we have AI that can help with both kind of helping us define research questions that we should ask. It can also help us do the actual research and actually doing, as well as the presentations of the same, and it can be pulled together a lot quicker. And AI can help with kind of personas too. We can use things like Coco, which is a plugin for Figma, to actually create personas and user journeys. And all of these things are really, really good because it saves us a vast amount of time and places emphasis on actually, you know, if you're not very good at visualizing some of these things, then that can do that for you. But there are a few things that I want to put some cautions around that. And it's, first of all, the data that we use for it. It's making sure when it comes to creating personas that we have a solid kind of solid basis for what we feed into these GPTs, for these ones to kind of generate all of the research for us and actually generate these personas for us. As we've seen with Gemini the last few days, there's a lot of bias in IA, and it's because AI will only ever give us what we've kind of trained it on. So we need to keep that in mind. We also need to consider the context of things as well. We need to, when you're doing that kind of first discovery pieces, we need to make sure that we understand the business needs and where they kind of coming from as well, and the landscape of everything, that we keep in mind what's kind of specific for our users. And then, of course, there's the aspect of reflection. So one of the reasons why personas has been debated so much is because they're not really being used all the time. But one of the reasons why personas are not being used is because it tends to be a UX designer or someone similar kind of doing it and handing them over to everyone else and just going, hey, these are the users that we designed for. There's no buy-in for them. There's no emotional connection. And that's a really important part. So when it comes to doing that kind of first-hand research, don't hand everything over to AI, but make sure that you use some time for reflection as well, so you get to know the data and the research behind it, so use it for what kind of matters. Aristotle, who, when we look at traditional storytelling, he's the one who's kind of formed the foundation for a lot of things. He's defined 7 golden rules of storytelling, and he puts characters and the plot on a kind of same level. And characters, of course, the main thing that a story is about. You would not really have a plot if there's no characters in a story. And in the same way, if we don't have any users, we don't really have any product or service. One of the reasons I'm a big advocate of personas is that they kind of help create characters that we kind of design for. And the more we understand who we actually design for, the more invested in them we are. The more we understand their needs, the more we can kind of visualize them in various different situations. And this concept from traditional storytelling as well, which is that you have to spend some time in the dark room if you want to have some vibrant mental images of your characters. So a lot of the advice when it comes to traditional storytelling is to spend a lot of time developing your characters, because if you do, then you can start imagining them in all sorts of situations. And similarly, when it comes to product design, when we develop our personas, for example, we should make sure that we know them, that we know, Karen, that we know Steve, that we know Luke, whatever they might be kind of called. And that everyone else in the business knows them as well. That will ensure that when we talk through kind of backlogs and features and user stories, that we can kind of bring them back into what actually matters, and that's the users that we're designing for. And of course, including business needs as well. The second point is define. So long before smartphones existed, and about the time when above the fold was a really big talking point, I started writing down the purpose of the page is to, and then I broke it down, but kind of even further, and said, as a first-time user, I should be able to, and as a second-time user, or a returning user, I should be able to. And the purpose of doing this was very much as a kind of a sense checking and a grounding myself into, okay, what should this page actually be about? And as a first-time user, when you come to the page, what do you need to be able to see? And what do you need to see as a returning user? Maybe you don't need all of that kind of about information, but you need less of it. So maybe you can have a smaller piece of it instead that still satisfies the needs for a first-time user. Now, that is something I still do today. What I didn't do back then, but I do a lot of today with my team, is working with assumptions and hypotheses. And that's become a way for us to quickly go out and capture what we believe to be true about our users, our product that we're working on, and how it's actually being used. And then we go out and we say, we believe that it's going to improve X, and we will know if we get X, Y, and Z as a kind of result. And the reason why this is so incredibly important to do is that whatever story you have in your backlog, whatever user story you have, behind every single user requirement and every decision when it comes to direction to take, there is a story. There is a story about what we think matters to users, to the business, and also a story about what we care about and what we don't care about. And by actually capturing these things as assumptions and hypotheses, we put words on these things. And again, we become more aware about what actually matters. One of the reasons why I couldn't be here today is that, or in Seattle today, is because we ran some testing, one of my teams today, on some things that I've been working on. So we spent time on Malmö Central Station, which is this lovely building, this morning, testing some really early concepts for some product that we've been working on. And it was really, really good. And I'm going to come back to a bit more about that later on in this kind of presentation. But for me to put everything together took a lot of time. It was still quite simple, but it took still quite a lot of time. There was a lot of different kind of variations and states, and there was Swedish and English that I needed to do the prototypes in. So one of the things that I'm really excited about when it comes to AI and kind of testing and kind of getting really early versions and concepts out and testing them is that there's now kind of tools and plugins that we can use to our advantage. And again, this is kind of featuring one for Figma, but there's other ones out there as well. But this one can help you from writing a script, from having some prompts in actually creating a website for you or kind of wireframes for you. There's also tools like Magic Copy that can actually generate copy for you, simplifying that process down a lot more, especially when you, like me, aren't the best copywriter or UX copywriter for that. I can write different things, but UX copy is not my strong point. So those things are really exciting, and they will speed up the process a lot. And of course, there will be future developments here as well, where we can actually get something working as a prototyping code and getting that out quicker as well in the future. There's some early developments now, but there's a few more things to come. Now, I wasn't the only one who started kind of writing down what a website or a page should do. This is from Josh Clark, who's using Excel essentially to design these pages and looking at, okay, what's the mindset that a user is going to be in? What tasks should the user be able to do on the page? And what are the goals that the page must fill for the organization? And what's really important about all of this is that we're being purposeful with the content that we include and the functionality we include. And it kind of, again, brings us back to traditional storytelling. If you look at a scene, there's always a reason for everything to be in a scene. There's always a reason for something to happen, why there's a glass left on a table. Like later on, something might happen to that glass. You never know, but like there's always a good reason for everything to be there. The next point is actually designing the experience later on. So back in 2009, the agency I worked for got tasked to redesign SonEricsson.com. This is the headquarters, or used to be the headquarters, quite close to where I live in Lund. And the SonEricsson team introduced us to something called experience goals. Now, as a digital agency and working in marketing, we were very much used to working with brand guidelines, experience principles, and tone of voice document, etc. But experience goals were new for us. And they kind of worked as this. So SonEricsson had a very clear product lifecycle from awareness to consideration to purchase on the first day after you've opened your phone, and so etc. etc. So what we did for the website redesign was that we looked at, for example, the objective of everything. We looked at the vision and the mission statement, and then we started defining 3 overarching experience goals for the website. One of them was the website knows me and what I want. And then we looked at each phase in that kind of product lifecycle, and we kind of broke that experience goal down to something a bit more tangible, something that can translate to that specific point. And these things provided really good North Stars during discussions and the design process. So if the website knows me and what I want, that meant that there should be some recommendations, for example. I can't remember exactly what we kind of came up with at that point, but it proved us really good reference points throughout all of this. Now, the actual design process for the website, and I wasn't doing the visual design, but the wireframe, so to speak. But even so, that was quite different. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with this and probably still have it to some extent. But there was a lot, obviously, it was before we were working into the browser. But we had lots of versions that we had to save, and then we had to send that version, we had to upload it onto the server, save it on the server, and then create a new version every single time we made some changes. So, and the process itself, actually working with it as well, was a lot more kind of waterfalls, and we included a lot more annotations in the wireframes, both for the designers in terms of like, this could be something we should think about here, but also for developers so they knew how things would actually work. Referencing interactions was a lot harder as well with that kind of prototyping. We used kind of reference links to other websites, or kind of, this is quite a nice animation, maybe we could use something like that. And of course, Figma and other tools have changed a lot of that. Today, our new kind of final rabbit hole makes me think of kind of design systems, prototyping, and of components, variations, states, and variables. And if you've done any of that, you know how time-consuming it is to get it right. And we heard Brooke yesterday talk about that. Maybe in the future, AI could be good at kind of helping us generate, for example, every single state of a button that we need to have in different colors and everything. And I hope and I think that this will be the future, hopefully not in a not so distant future, even so. The other thing that we're starting to see now, and we had this even earlier on, I think it was back in 2010 with the grid, which was a very early day AI-powered kind of create website generator, which didn't survive. But we know this is Wix, and there's other tools and there's other kind of platforms out there that do the same. But they essentially start with kind of a question: what kind of website do you want to create? And then based on that, it kind of gives you some basic templates, and you can adjust templates based on that. This, I think, is going to get even more advanced in the future, and it will make things a lot easier. And we saw the example before where we can bring kind of get into code a lot easier as well. So that will simplify the process of actually creating websites a lot kind of quicker. Other systems, the coding probably wouldn't be affected as much. But there's also developments in AI in terms of keeping track of things like copy and making sure that we're working with the same copy in all of the places. So all of these kind of things are quite a big headache at the moment. Those will be made so much easier going forward, which is really exciting. And of course, again, we have this thing about how, obviously, when we're doing all of these things, we need, as designers, we need to be really clear in our minds of explaining and actually being better at explaining our thinking. Because, of course, there will be layer suggestions that programs can kind of do, and they're based on data or perhaps the best conversions or what the brand should do. But we need to be able to give these tools the right prompts, and we need to be able to describe what we actually want to help AI create those things. And then there's, of course, is the why as well, which is, again, bringing us back to the context I talked about before, that we need to understand the business context and user context around everything, and bring that rationale behind what AI is kind of doing, be able to modify things, which we've also heard about before during this kind of conference. In traditional storytelling, you talk a lot about the red thread, at least you do in Swedish. But this is the theme or the through line that runs through everything and that connects everything. So it's the kind of the learning you will take from a story, for example. But in the same way, just like the experience goals for Sony Ericsson, going forward when we're feeding things into AI, having these things defined is going to be even more important for us. Now, the second to last thing I've kind of talked about that we do as UX and products designers is present our work to get buy-in, feedback, and sign off. Many of you will, or some of you maybe, will remember views like this, and maybe that's still the case for some of you as well. But in many of the companies I've worked before, there's been a habit of printing out the work in progress deliverables and the presentation decks that we were going to present to clients and internal team members, and I'm putting them up on the wall. Today, of course, as I mentioned, that still happens, for many, how we work has actually changed. For many companies, it's not common that at least someone, when we hold a presentation, is remote. Presentations have in general become a lot more kind of digital. And right now, even though most meetings are synchronous, meaning they happen at the same time, we have the kind of benefit of that, with that people can ask questions and get answers at that point in time, though sometimes they, of course, can derail the conversations and steer us off track a little bit. Now, there are changes to this happening as well, and if we run late, if we miss a meeting, there's tools like Microsoft's Copilot that can already today summarize the key points from a presentation, for example, and give you kind of suggestions of what you should do going forwards. There are other tools as well, and there's a kind of even more shift towards more async meetings. A while back, I listened to Tim Ferriss' podcast and an episode where he interviewed Sam Korkos, I think his name is, I can't pronounce it properly, but he's the CEO and co-founder of Levels, and he talked about how they use Loom a lot. So instead of having meetings, they record Looms and then they share with the whole company, and that's how they do things. So this, together with the future of being able to actually use that for more design critiques and for more things, means that maybe we don't need to have as many meetings in the future. And I'm not necessarily saying that those meetings are bad, but there are instances where having async meetings can be a really good thing. And editing these things as well, when it comes to video editing, is also becoming a lot easier. We can just, instead of having to go and kind of use the scrubber, we can go through, we can just simply delete pieces of text from the transcript, and that will automatically kind of edit down the video. There are also tools like HeyGen out there, which can generate presentations based on a script. Again, this is based on, obviously, you have a script, so you've written something down. But what's really exciting, which we're going to get back to a little bit later on, is you can even personalize it. So it's using your voice and a different language. And so a friend of mine did that the other day, actually, where she got it to speak in English with her voice, and they just gave her, based on the script that she had given. Now, why am I talking about this and presentations? When we look back to traditional storytelling, there's a really key thing, which is about how we tell a story and the order in which we tell our stories. So this screenshot is from, I forget what it's called right now, but it's from an early screening anyway, from Finding Nemo. And this was the early order of how that film would actually work. And as you can see from the kind of little storyboard here, it wasn't, in this version, it wasn't until the end that the audience will find out that the reason that Coral got killed by Barracuda. And when they asked the audience after the test screening what they thought of the movie, they all kind of said, you know what, I didn't really like it. I didn't really like Marley. I don't understand why he was acting the way he did. So what they did, because that wasn't obviously the response they wanted, they restructured the film and kind of changed the plot and the narrative structure so that the audience would learn in the beginning why Marlin had done what he'd done, so or why Coral had been killed. All that kind of set up the whole premises around why Marlin was behaving the way he did and being overprotective over Nemo. And that completely changed how people viewed the movie and how people actually viewed Marlin. So that was the kind of the purpose and the objective they were looking for. So this is a really good example of what's called purposeful storytelling and narrative structure as well. So with every single story that we tell, we always have a kind of an objective in mind. At least we should have an objective in mind, a goal in mind, a kind of emotional connection or response to a question that we want answered to. So narrative structure is very much about what you're going to tell your audience when. And then when you tie purposeful storytelling to it, it's also the why. Now, with the help of AI, we can get some help with that, because obviously there's a lot to be learned from traditional kind of storytelling and how to structure stories the best. I Googled, I used, can't remember which one I used, I can't see from either. I used an AI tool anyway, Copilot, thank you very much. I used Copilot to figure out, what should I talk about the role of storytelling for UX in the time of AI contain. And it gave me a bunch of suggestions, and some of them were good and some of them weren't really good. And this is, again, where we can kind of lean back on traditional storytelling and learn quite a lot from them, and where actually knowing these things can benefit us a lot. And that's narrative structure, understanding kind of that every single story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we look at things from kind of a presentation point of view, every single presentation is a form of story and a user journey. And we can map out what we think the kind of emotional response is going to be to a presentation, and also to kind of look at, okay, well, where are the likely interruptions going to be? Where have the likely interruptions happened in the past? And obviously right now, that's something that can happen manually, but going forwards, there's a lot of improvements where actually things like Microsoft's Copilot can actually help with this and offer suggestions on what you should be doing, and kind of look at, okay, what were some of the key points where people opinions differentiated and what mattered to some key stakeholders. And this is really key, because understanding our stakeholders and the people we present to is a lot of kind of what makes or breaks buy-in for something or sign off for something. And maybe one day in the future, we can combine things like HeyGen with Microsoft Copilot, and we can have personalized videos being kind of sent out to certain stakeholders, or Loom's being sent out to stakeholders with targeted messaging that kind of tells a very detailed story to one stakeholder, or tells kind of more of an overview to another one. Who knows? There's a lot of opportunities out there. And of course, AI tools and GPTs can help with the kind of creation of presentations as well, because not everyone is a great designer of presentations. So when it comes to presenting, it's very much about presenting the right story to the right people in the right way. And here, one of the things we can also learn from traditional storytelling is to use storyboarding as a technique, even to kind of try to map out what we want to say, what different slides our presentation should hold. And again, if we want to use traditional storytelling or storyboarding, we can use, again, tools like Coco for creating that. The last point is around testing. So I mentioned before that I've kind of now we're using a lot of assumptions and hypotheses when we're testing our different things. And even today, some of the assumptions that we kind of defined, they proved to not be true. And we came to kind of quite a big realization of that, which made it so useful. We do also do a lot of testing with a software called Listen at the moment. And there's, of course, a lot of other softwares out there. And they are great, but what's really time consuming is analyzing all of the results. And here I'm really excited about what AI can help us do with actually analyzing videos, analyzing test results, clicks, and coming up with suggestions of actions that we should be taking. But there's some things to be kind of mindful of as well when it comes to kind of testing. We've heard it before, but I will say it again, and that's obviously being aware of where the data comes from. So this, as I'm showing you now, is that kind of suggestion of an outline of a talk related to my topic from Copilot. But the little funny emphasis point down here is that it's actually pulled this information partly from my talk description. So again, when it comes to data, make sure you don't have that kind of internal bias. So it's when it comes to testing, make sure you get the right data out there. And then, of course, it's about understanding context as well. So this is not so much about kind of testing any digital products, but it's a nice little anecdote that, you know, one of the reasons why 50 Shades of Grey became so popular is that users could read it on kind of a Kindle device instead of kind of flaunting it to everyone that they were reading 50 Shades of Grey. So again, when it comes to data, AI will be able to tell us absolutely anything. You know, they can tell whatever story you want about data. And until we learn to trust it a bit more, we need to make sure that we kind of we scrutinize it a little bit, and we understand the context around that kind of data. And again, bringing back to kind of storytelling aspect, when it comes to presenting those data back, when we look at how we can actually persuade people and how we can move people into action, then repeatedly storytelling seems to be the kind of the stronger way, rather than kind of just letting that data tells me that to X, Y, and Z. But who knows, maybe in the future, we will trust AI so much that we think that they are the kind of the right answer in there. So what I've covered today are a glimpse into how much has changed in the field of UX and product design in the 15-ish past years, and some of the things that are changing right now, and some ideas on what might change even more so in the future. And no one exactly knows what's going to come and when it's going to come. What we can say with certainty is that AI will become better at understanding what we want. But in order for AI to understand what we actually want, we still need to know what we want. And we need to be able to actually be really clear with AI what it is they want to do. Brooke talked yesterday about that prompting has kind of, the prompt language has kind of improved. And Luke has been talking today about the way that we interact with these various tools will also change. Sometimes there's no UI, sometimes there is UI, sometimes it's prompts, sometimes it's something else. But what's really key for us is making sure that we can tell AI what we want. And in order for AI to know what we want to do, we need to be super, super clear on that and have that kind of agreement internally. And this is why I'd like to argue that storytelling is absolutely crucial when it comes to working with the AI, both in order for us to get the output that we are after, but also when it comes to actually taking the output and selling it into the business and clients. And as AI gets more advanced, we'll have more trust in it, but there will still be kind of an aspect where AI can't replace us, where the human aspect is really, really needed. One thing we can be sure of is that how we do things will change. And AI shouldn't be something that we just use for the different phases of a product and UX process as such, but it's going to be an integral part in the products and services that we actually define, and the products and services that we use to actually design and define things as well. And it will no doubt also lead to new products that aren't in existence today. And I think Rabbit's R1 is one of those examples that we're seeing kind of new things where what we do will become both more visible in terms that we have to put words on things, but also less visible in terms that it will be different UIs. So what does that mean for us as UX designers in terms of making sure that we can stay current and not lose out? I think it's safe to say that AI is not here to take our jobs just yet, but it's important to stay up to date with what's happening in AI, to try different tools and see for yourself how they work and how they don't work, and to get familiar with data and how to read it and not read it, and then to practice putting words on your thoughts and your work and actually how you kind of present it. The role of storytelling in the time of AI, and that kind of last one, this is why I'm here today and why you're listening to me right now, putting words on things and why storytelling matters. I've talked about storytelling under each of the 5 areas of what we do at a high level But if I'm going to leave you with a few things around the role of UX and product design, storytelling for UX and product design, it's very much this. Make sure that you treat your users as characters in storytelling. Spend some time in the darkroom and get to know both your users and your stakeholders. Practice writing down the plot of your product and service you work on. Get used to actually putting words on things and try those different prompting tools and the plugins, etc., that can get you to generate things. Make a habit of working with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and actually defining that for pretty much everything you do. It can be on a whole experience. It can be on a page level. It can be on a presentation. And see if you can actually storyboard it as well, sketching out what should a presentation contain, what's the purpose of each slide, again, the kind of story, beginning, a middle, and an end. And then be clear on getting into the habit of kind of what matters, what are the experience guidelines, the experience goals, the style guides, the tone and voice, those kind of the red thread that runs through everything, that binds everything together. If you do all of this, then you've essentially done something that will help with each and of the kind of phases that we talked about today, both from kind of research, define, design, present, and to test. And the more mature AI gets, the stronger the need for these skills will be, in my opinion. A lot of the developments over the past 10, 20 to 15 years that I've shared today, like the ability to collaborate, like this is a screenshot from Figma, we now take for granted. And going forward, 5 years from now, there'll be some other things that we will take as a given. What they will be, we'll have to see. But what I want to leave you with as well when it comes to when and how to use AI in the UX and product design process for now and the foreseeable future is this: to use it where it makes sense. Use it where you can leverage the AI's strong points. Don't use it too much where reflection is needed and that kind of critical thinking is needed, where you need to get hands-on in order to really get to realizations. So, which is the case often when you work with personas, when you use user journeys and such. Use it to generate some input, but still spend some time in that kind of dark room. Historically, storytelling has been the way to pass on information and to move people into action. And more than anything now, getting people together and getting people to see the same story, the same view in their heads is absolutely critical. So try to make in the habit of actually sharing these things and get stakeholders on board as well. So the final thoughts for me is that if you want to set yourself up for the changes that are coming, my bet is on staying up to date with AI and developments in it, but also to develop your written and verbal communication skill, to master storytelling, more precisely purposeful storytelling. Because really, when it comes down to it, storytelling is at the heart of every communication, whether that's communicating with people or different AI tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was a fantastic talk. I love that future vision of combining the various AI tools that are novel and new right now.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Okay. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we will address them. Let's see. And okay, we have one here. How can AI help us with telling better narratives, ones that are more unique and differentiated? Can it expand our creativity?
I think it can. I mean, the really powerful thing of AI is that it's really good at determining patterns. So if we, for example, know, excuse me, if we, for example, know that we, if we think of a goal in mind, so we want to increase signups or we want to create more awareness of something, we can make sure that we get story patterns at the beginning, middle, and end that matches with that and organize things in the right way. So this is again where when you look at how most people put together presentations, they're not really clear on the outcome at the end or the experience. Sometimes we are, but a lot of the time when you work with people and getting them to actually define the purpose of the page, the purpose of this presentation, it's quite hard for people to put words on it. So I definitely think that AI will it's already now, it can help you get to that point. But right now you need to know a bit of bit of that yourself in order to kind of distill out certain things. But the more you work with it, the more it will get better. And the more you kind of train it on what's specific to you, then the better it will be as well. So I definitely think it can. And expand creativity, I think, yes, I guess there's insanely creative things coming out. So I'm not sure if you mean any creativity in particular on an aspect, specific creative aspect. Otherwise, my answer is yes, I believe it can.
Okay, let's see. I think that may be our questions for today. A fantastic talk, and thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing with us.
Have a lovely rest of the day, everyone. And thank you for listening.